At the New Jersey SBDC Network, our mission is simple: to help businesses grow and succeed. Our consulting, training, and information services make it easier for businesses to reach their potential. Whether you're currently in operation or just starting out, we have the right tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. Visit us online to get started on your path to success today.
A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. My name is Takoa Bell. I am an event coordinator for the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on the behalf of Dr. Tendai Nduro, the regional director, I would like to welcome you all to our B2B private label supplying a store brand webinar. For those of you here that are unfamiliar with the SBDC, it stands for Small Business Development Centers. And here at the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers at Rutgers-Newark, we serve as the premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to establish small businesses, startups, and as well as to entrepreneurs. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, and we service those in Essex County. Our center is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and funded through a partnership agreement between the Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Our mission here is to help entrepreneurs as well as business owners start and grow sustainable, successful businesses through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. Now, these services are provided to you at no cost and are paid for by your tax dollars. If you or your business is located in Essex County, our website is www.rnsbdc.com. And on the top right-hand corner of our site, we have a button labeled Request Counseling. And clicking on that button will lead you to fill out some information about your business, including the help you are seeking. And within 24 to 48 business hours, a consultant will reach out to you for an assessment. And for those of you here that are not in Essex County, our headquarters website is www.njsbdc.com. And on that website, you can type in your county and it will refer you to your local SBDC office. For the benefit of everyone attending today's webinar, we will be taking questions via the chat and the Q&A feature here on Zoom. So feel free to post and ask your questions there, and we will do our best to respond during or at the end of the webinar. A copy of the presentation slides, along with a video recording of this webinar, will be emailed to you within 48 to 72 business hours. So you can always refer back to this information long after the webinar has ended. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you all our presenter for today's webinar, Ahmet Akdag. Ahmet is the CEO and owner of Styrmont and is an SBDC consultant here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark in the areas of e-commerce, self-hosted and marketplaces, BC and B2B online strategic planning, and supply chain sourcing. And now, without further ado, I will turn today's webinar over to Ahmet.
Thank you, Takoa. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation now. Glad to have everyone here this afternoon. So the topic today is going to be about, as the title says, B2B private label, supplying a store brand. This is going to be a bit of a high level topic, mostly because when it comes down to this B2B private labeling, there's a lot of factors involved. It depends on the retailer, the partner you work with, the retailer you work with, and the type of products you provide to those retailers. So it's specific to categories, it's specific to suppliers, it's specific to buyers. But we are going to take a look at some of the common traits among them, as well as this is going to be focused more on the e-commerce end, but these practices are similar for traditional businesses as well that are doing B2B private label, because a lot of these retailers, they do have traditional brick and mortar stores. So while they might be while the focus of this topic is on your products being sold through their e-commerce sites, which is their own websites online. It's not specifically to that because it's pretty much the same process for getting your products into their private label for the traditional B2B style. So we're going to touch on that now. When it comes to B2B traditional, what I mean is companies that are doing business offline and through brick and mortar location. These are all your traditional sellers, the physical products customers can buy in person. If it's a wholesaler, they are selling these to the retail locations. This pretty much refers to everything that's not done online. And then we get to B2B e-commerce, which is where we're going to be focusing a bit more. But in B2B e-commerce, the companies are retailers or marketplaces who are looking for suppliers to provide them with products. Most of the time, it's because they're going to list these products on their website. We're going to go over a couple of examples just to give an idea, but essentially, when you are supplying it to their private label, you then proceed to do drop shipping for them, wherein the customer that visits their website and orders that product from their website, that store brand from their website, you receive the purchase order and then you ship it to the customer. There are levels above this where, as you continue doing business, and depending on the products, they might make arrangements where they purchase in bulk and then you ship it to their locations. And this bulk can either be LTL or TL from your warehouse, or they might even upgrade to something with direct import if you are working with a foreign overseas manufacturer, or if you are an overseas manufacturer, they might do something where they do direct import and then purchase container loads. Again, this depends a lot on the supplier and the category, but these are some of the common things that occur in the private label operations that these retailers and marketplaces have. We're going to jump a bit into what these store brands are. Now, I know private label has other meanings as well, which is actually where it's the production or packaging of products on the brand or name of another retailer that is the manufacturer's own brand. So the topic here I'm actually talking about is going to be store brands, because when it comes to private label, like I said, it's a broader category. It's not specific to just these online retailers and these marketplaces. It can be any business who wants to obtain a product and then put their label on it and have it sold as like a private label. What we're referring to here as store brands or house brands, is in some places is defined as. It is private label, but it's a private label of the brand of a retailer. Sometimes they're also known as generic brands. So if you go to a Walgreens or CSV, for example, and you see those products that have that generic brand for that company, for Walgreens or CVS, that's what it refers to. Those are products that retailer is doing private label with, and a supplier is selling to them under a brand that the retailer has invested in and has a specific mission with. Because these generic brands usually have some kind of purpose when they bring it in. Sometimes they might have multiple generic brands because they're trying to do different qualities, different types of customers. Other times it's just a more affordable option for customers. It provides value without that brand name marketing costs that comes with those national brands. And national brands are things from the companies you might know as Coca-Cola. They have the big names, and the retailers here, when they're doing house brands, they're essentially giving alternative options to those national brands. So the process for pretty much every store brand is RFQ. Any retailer or marketplace that is doing private label is going to be using RFQs. The question becomes, how do you get into the RFQ process? There are differences. It depends on the supplier. Some of them have some kind of portal where you can sign up. Some of them might want you to become signed on as a supplier first before they even let you have that option. And in some cases, these RFQs are invite only, where you, even if you are a supplier with them, they might not invite you into their private label RFQ until you've done some business with them and a buyer or account manager has referred you up to the private label team. So there's different ways of getting in there, but 99% of the time it's RFQs because of the process, how the process normally works for private label. When an RFQ is sent out, what the supplier, the marketplace, or the retailer is doing is they're going to let you know which brands they're looking for. Sometimes they might not, because that would imply that they're building a new brand and they haven't finished the branding specifics yet. Maybe they haven't come up with the logo yet. Maybe they didn't even have come up with a official name yet, but they have an idea of what they want in it. That can happen, but usually they will let you know which brand it is, and it'll usually be an existing brand. New brands don't happen that often, but it'll usually be one of their existing brands. So examples would be Amazon's Amazon Basic, that's an existing brand. Walmart has Mainstay, that's an existing brand. Home Depot has a couple of brands, including Home Decorator and Stylewell. These are existing brands. So what they will do is that they will send these quote sheets out to anyone on the suppliers that are on their RFQ list for that category. They will say what type of products they're kind of looking for. They may or may not give sample images. Sometimes these quotes will be very minimal, in which case they want you to give them some ideas. It depends a bit on the product. For some products, you might give a bit of technical information, and in some products, it might be most of it is a design matter. If it's like apparel, textile, anything like that has like a cosmetic appearance, they might be looking for like a specific design or specific trend. And for other products, food, beverages, anything like that, that's the cosmetic aspect is not the key part, it's actually the product itself. In those cases, they'll be looking for a bit of the technical aspects of it. Now, of course, regardless of whichever it is, cost is always what they're really looking for. At the end of the day, that's the deal breaker. But what they start with is trying to get an idea of what options are out there and what you can provide to them. So they're not just looking for whatever might exist in your catalog. They are looking to see what you can offer additionally for them. Because when it comes down to private labels, having some of that exclusivity is what they're looking for with products on a competitive basis. They don't want to deal with situations where, you might give them, maybe it's an item you're selling and then you're willing to make it for them as private label too, but it's pretty much the same item. There's going to be they're going to be concerned about, even if it is under their brand, that they're going to be competing with existing products that are pretty much the same. So that's something they usually take into consideration. So they like if you're able to provide something exclusive to them, whether you might be changing some of the features or improving some of the features for them, or coming up with designs exclusively for them that you won't be selling elsewhere. That's usually what they look for. So these quote sheets will have the basic product data and design information. Sometimes it might be minimal, like I said, where they expect you to provide them options. Other times it'll be very clear cut, and what they'll look for is your capabilities. So instead of looking at what you can offer them, what they will look at is, are you able to meet our standards and give us a good price while doing it? That is another approach that these RFQs can take. Because what will happen is, once these RFQs are responded to with the information they ask for, they will request samples if you're considered a finalist. And like I said, getting to that point, they do check the cost to see if it will be a profitable investment for them. So once these RFQs are sent, you send the product information, you send the prices, you send the details. There might be instances where they come back with feedback and they say, "Oh, can you do something like this? Oh, can you do that? Oh, can we, adjust? Is the price? Can we adjust the price? Is there room in the price?" There'll be some back and forth there, and then you'll enter the samples phase, where they will then actually want to see the product completed. And sent to them. In some cases, they just want to see the product, but for some retailers, there has been situations where they actually want everything prepared in a final like package. So like assume you are sending a final product to a customer. They will want to see it that way. It's not very often, but sometimes depending on the product, the private label team might not be 100% sure of how the product is going to get to the customer, and they may want to see the entire picture. So they might ask a sample, but the sample to be sent to them as if it was a final product being sent to a customer. So you need to have some flexibility there in regards to how you can package and send the samples to them, because they will have their guidelines for how they want things packaged. Some retailers may even want boxes that are stamped a specific way or printed on with specific information, not just stickered on, but the box cardboard itself has certain information printed on it, which is an additional investment. So you do need to take these into consideration as potentials. If there's any areas of question, you do have a team you are speaking to for that information usually in this process. So it's an unknown situation, but these are some of the common things that occur in the RFQ process. Now, what usually happens afterwards is you might get approved. They might decide to work with you. They say we're going to get your products. What they will do is they will send some kind of either they will send um, a kind of initial or preliminary amount of units they're looking to buy. Some may send you a specific PO list saying, we are going to buy this many. Some may send you an ideal amount they're looking for, because what happens is if you are doing it for e-commerce, for example, and as I mentioned, drop shipping it to their customers, what that essentially means is that you're bringing the product, you're putting it in your warehouse, and then they're listing it on their website, and when a customer orders it, you're sending it from your warehouse to their customer. So in those cases, you do need to keep the products in your warehouse, and usually they don't pay for the amount you order in. That's considered your investment. They do pay you once customers order. So there are some variations there. It's not, private label doesn't always mean that they're going to pay to order the inventory. Sometimes they might, if it's especially if it's dropship, sometimes they might have you bring in the inventory yourself to your warehouse, and then they will only pay you as it gets ordered. So that's just something to keep in mind. But usually what happens is that they give you a checklist upon approval. The checklist will usually include some kind of product testing, label creation, purchase order creation, and manufacturing arrive by date. Just to break these down, product testing is common. Basically, they want you to, they'll give you instructions on getting the product tested at lab. Now, this might not always be required if you've already tested the product, or if the manufacturer has tested the product and they have the certification from, say, Bureau Veritas. But sometimes there are situations where that retailer has their own testing metrics, and they will want you to have the product sent to the lab to be tested according to their standards, not the regular default standards, because sometimes they might have some extra requirements. In those cases, you do have to pay to have those products tested, and they will want to see the proof of approval that they have passed the tests. Label creation, this is basically just an instruction sheet saying how to prepare the labels according to their guidelines. Some may say you can print them yourself. Some might say you need to use a third party who will prepare the labels. They'll give you instructions on that. Usually this is an investment as well, because you're usually one paying for it. Purchase order creation, this can be as simple as they're just your whatever dashboard you're set up with. They might just have you set up an account there and then throw the POs in there, and you're responsible for following up. Some cases they might have a bit more of a technological integration aspects to it, so they might require using some other service that's only available for private label that you need to set up with, onboard on, and make the connections. Or they might have EDI requirements. Now, EDI is a bit of a investment, a software investment, because EDI, it requires some funding to set it up. It requires some training to get your staff knowledgeable with it. So what companies will usually do is that they'll have some kind of browser-based or web app or something like that, where you can some kind of EDI service that you can access as a subscription as a service through the browser. And it is usually a company that the retailer is partnered with to make it easier for manufacturers and suppliers who might not have EDI set up in-house, and who haven't put in the investment yet. They will give these alternative options so they can have some kind of EDI. Um, but this isn't guaranteed for every retailer. Some might have EDI requirements that you need to have in-house. Now, that doesn't happen very often, because if you've gotten to this point already, these details would have been discussed and they would have given you information. You wouldn't reach this level without discussing all your capabilities ahead of time. But it's good to know that these are some of the things that will be brought up, and how you can address them or prepare for them when the situation arises. And the final one, terminology for this can change depending on whatever terminology the retailer is using. But usually there's some kind of arrive by date, which is pretty much the deadline for when they want the products available to sell on the website. So the products will be listed on their sites. And this is more for e-commerce, because when it comes to arrive by date for in the stores, that arrive by date is literally when it arrives in their stores, and that'll be the deadline they expect to receive the stocks in the stores. But for online, what it means is having stock available, especially if it's dropship. You basically notify them when you expect it to be in your warehouse and how much stock there is, so they can activate the item on that day and start selling, or maybe activate it earlier if they have some kind of pre-sale capabilities on their website. So these are important things to keep in mind. Um, Final note on this process is that you will always remain in contact with the retailer or the marketplace for resupplying, for marketing, and for expanding the assortment. Sometimes you'll have a retailer who will be in constant communication with you. Sometimes you'll have ones that don't seem to respond unless you contact them first. Even though it is their brand, you are still, as a supplier, going to have to check in now and then. That does happen sometimes. So there's things to keep in mind there. But essentially, once the star brand stuff gets started, once you get the RFQs and assuming you get the approval, once the products come in, everything after that, essentially, as for your responsibility as a supplier, is usually to keep in touch with resupply. Because one more thing too is that even if they're responding to you, ask for a resupply at a bad time, because usually the retailer will try to have people in there who are familiar with the products, who are familiar with the category, who are buyers, who have years of experience. But it's not guaranteed. So you're still going to be the expert in this relationship for the products, no matter how experienced the people on the the retailer side is. At the end of the day, as a supplier, you should consider yourself, and technically, they will consider you as the expert of your products. So your responsibility is to just keep in touch with them for resupplying, for finding out marketing. Marketing can either mean something they're investing in, or something where you're both investing. Rarely will it be you investing only, because it is their brand, so they will be involved in some way or another. And then third one, expanding assortment, basically just means either keeping you in the loop for new RFQs in the brand, or in the case of an existing catalog, what they will do is they might just contact you directly to see if you can expand out existing selection, maybe add more sizes, maybe add more colors, maybe make some difference in the features, maybe add some supplemental products. Those will be a bit simpler than just the RFQ, because they're communicating with you directly for as a supplier, and they're just giving options to increase the catalog or the assortment you have with them. And we'll touch upon these parts a bit more, but here's a example of some of the information that will show up on the RFQ. This one specifically was pulled from Amazon. This isn't how it looks, but these are this is how the template itself looks. But these are the information that the template asks normally. So as you can see here, there's quite a few different questions they have. They have identification, product information, packaging information. They put in additional specs just so you can give them any additional information. They look for details on product certifications, and any regulatory requirements they should know about. Um, They look for any kind of pre-work, what they call, which is essentially anything they should consider when they're trying to get the products into store brand. Are there any things that they need to do due to either the type of the product, regulatory requirements, or any additional costs if you are manufacturing it overseas and then bringing it in. Terms now, like I said, this is for Amazon, so Amazon asks everything at once. Some retailers might not ask might not start conversation with all these questions. Some might just start with the products and a little bit of the information before they jump into all these details. But all of these details will usually come into play at some point or another. So terms for discussing the the costs, the ports, the shipping, logistics. And then lead time and pricing is where you give them information for their calculation. Because when you're giving private label, it's kind of a wholesale relationship. So you're giving them the wholesale cost, and then what they're doing is that they are listing it or selling it with a price of their own, where you give them the MSRP to help them price accordingly, but they're not required to specifically copy your MSRP. They kind of just use it as a reference. So that's the kind of information that they look for. So like I mentioned, when the RFQ, the process, you'll get basic information, design and quality wise. Usually they'll send a quote sheet. Sometimes well, I've seen it as an Excel file with different sheets and all these information. And sometimes they even want you to put they want you to put pictures in there. It'll be a bit complex, but that'll be the kind of quote sheet they send you to fill in relevant information. Other times they might just send like a kind of PowerPoint presentation with sections that have the type of information they're looking for in the sheet. Usually in those cases what happens is that RFQ is a bit more they're starting out with what kind of products they can find, and then later they will be sending a quote sheet in. And in the way I showed for Amazon, Amazon will send a quote sheet where they just want all the information. What I mean here by render images too is sometimes, like I mentioned, you're not always going to be providing products in your catalog. And ideally, you should try to give them products that aren't in your catalog that you can provide them with your additional capabilities. And you might not have the product existing, so they will accept render images or computer generated images or any kind of artificial image, I would say. Basically, a drawing or rendering or concept art of the product. You will usually suffice early on. This also demonstrates the design capabilities of your team. Now, this obviously applies to products where the design and the manufacturing aspects, the construction aspects matter. For products that don't have those considerations, the renders might just be kind of the packaging, how the packaging might look. But then you would be doing that later because you would be putting their labeling in. So that's something we'll ask for later. But early on, just for the product itself, they'll want you to send them something, and your design team to give them a basic JPEG of what the product might look like, and then you'll be providing better images down the line, including with the kind of branding stuff they want. So that is something that will pop up as well, but there is no specific requirements to what those sample images should look like early on, because they understand that if you are offering them something new, you're probably not going to have a picture of the product because you haven't made it yet, and you are just giving them the concept of it to them for their consideration. So that's something to keep in mind. But this also demonstrates the capabilities of your design team, because if they're looking for you to provide them designs, it helps if you are able to design something close to what their expectation is. And it'll show you as a potentially reliable partner, because when it comes to private label, one big impact here, as I mentioned, is not just the design, not just the features, it's the cost. But beneath all of that is the business relationship you have with the retailer, which is kind of like a soft characteristic, because you can't really quantify it, but it's being able to demonstrate your reliability, your professionalism. your timeliness, all helps in your favor if you are going to be pursuing this private label relationship, because if there have been situations where even the best cost that comes to the supplier, they might go with someone else who might charge a little bit more but are reliable and timely. Because when it comes to private label, the retailer is making an investment, their team is putting in time and effort, which is money, and they don't want a situation where if they're not 100% sure about the supplier and something happens, um, while the supplier will be affected in their business relationship with the retailer will be also negatively impacted, because this investment they made is going to be significantly and negatively impacted. So at the at every process, communication is key, is what I'm trying to say. But these are some of the things that pop up in the RFQ process. I went over design as well. The only things to note here is, some like I mentioned here, retailers marketing team, sometimes they might not have a marketing team, which can be a bit of a nuisance for you if you're trying to get them to give you a bit more details, and they're not able to provide some of those details, so you're kind of just left guessing to what they might be looking for. um, but that can pop up. And in the case where it's not, like I mentioned, applicable to category, something that what I mentioned for material is, they don't just want like the material as you present it to customers, for example, where you kind of have like a simplified explanation. They want kind of a technical breakdown. You don't have to go too technical, but they will want some kind of breakdown to actually understand what's in the product. They want to understand if all the material in it is exactly what they're looking for. Maybe they're looking for some kind of blend, maybe they're looking for some kind of other material. They'll bring this up with you, but when you are discussing with them, as much information as you can provide without getting too detailed. And of course, if it's something where it's like a trade secret sort of situation, you don't have to divulge too much there, of course. These private label stuff are going to be a private, non-disclosure. So that's why I'm kind of limited here with the amount of information I can show you, because all of these are considered confidential information that usually doesn't get shared out. So it's very restrictive in sharing what kind of the tables and everything. But when you start this relationship, everything is considered confidential, but you don't have to divulge too much stuff that would be affect your trade secret, because at the end of the day, when they're doing their research, there is always the risk that eventually they might work with another supplier, or they might decide to find a manufacturer themselves and subcontract the manufacturer directly for their brands. It doesn't happen often, because retailers do like using suppliers and distributors and wholesalers. They don't there's a common fear in a lot of especially some of the clients I've worked with, where if I do private label with them and give my factory information, this big retailer is going to turn around and work with the factory I work with and cut me out. That is always a risk, but usually it's not an immediate risk, and I haven't seen it actually happen, except in situations where, in one case, the client failed to continue meeting those soft characteristic expectations and dropped the ball on the communication side, in which case the relationship got cut off there. But that was triggered by the seller, the supplier, not keeping up their standards. Otherwise, it simplifies it for them, because you're in some cases you're the middleman if you're not the manufacturer, but you're the supplier who has a manufacturer you're working with. But they will keep that middleman, because if you're doing good with them, you understand their system, you've already started working with them, they don't see any reason to cut you out, and it might not, for them it might not be worth the savings to bother trying to find that manufacturer, unless the product they consider as profitable enough that if they leave you and cut out the middleman, and go directly to the manufacturer. And usually what happens with private label is some kind of agreement is signed, so there is at least if you do get approved, there is at least that time given where they won't try to breach the agreement. So that's something to keep in mind. Yes, there is a risk, but it's not an immediate risk. You are working with any online retailer or marketplace. These are large companies. They're not there's some level of reputation and reliability there where they won't as immediately turn and cut you out. It's just not a very common situation, so it's just something to keep in mind. It is a risk, but it's not something you need to be you know crippling yourself and your business out of fear of, because there is a lot of opportunities in these private labels. If you can get on these RFQs, you will have access to a lot of potential business, if you are able to provide products to these companies. Going into the details a bit, when it comes to materials, as I mentioned, accurate discussion of the product. Retailers will usually have their own expectations. Sometimes they won't. But as I said, any technical information you can provide, and any clarifications you can give will always help. Anything you can give ahead of time helps. Sometimes things slow down during this process because of the amount of data that's being processed by both teams, both your team and the private label team. So anything you can give up front and reduce follow-ups on is always a positive. Follow-ups tend to lose time, and there are situations where if there is a tight deadline, you don't want to lose time dealing with follow-ups, because by the time you get all your information, suddenly you find you don't have much time to do all the other things, and that can put you in a crunch, and being in a crunch with private label is very tough. So it's something best to avoid. So if you can knock everything out in the beginning, always positive. Prices, as I said, is a vital aspect, and probably technically the vital aspect at the end of the day for the RFQ process. The retailer will always expect the best cost, and they will always negotiate a price. So they almost never accept whatever cost you give them first, unless it's type of niche product where the market seems to have the prices set there. They will always try to negotiate. The best strategy there isn't just to negotiate the cost, but see if there's some kind of additional scaling you can do to offer them a cost reduction. One thing I've commonly seen is if it's a private label, and they are looking to do drop ship, and they're trying to negotiate the cost with you. One thing I've advised is ask them if they'll do wholesale or direct import. If they'll be willing to buy in bulk, then you would be offering them a better cost. And the advantage is when it comes to wholesale and direct import, they pay on or with order. Of course, there's terms, and the term dates depending on the negotiation. Maybe it's 60 days, maybe it's 90 days. It could even be 30 days if it's just a wholesale aspect of it. But if you are able to, if they want a cost reduction and then you respond and ask them, well, I can give you a better cost if you do wholesale and buy in bulk. The advantage here is that, as I mentioned, when it comes to drop ship, you don't get paid until the units sell. So you're going to be at the mercy of basically a consignment process where, upon order, you get your cost, which is kind of slow, and not very steady cash flow. Whereas if you got wholesale, they might order in bulk, and in that purchase order, they are essentially going to be paying you for the entire order, whether or not those units sell once they receive in their warehouses. So anytime you're in that, if you get into the private label, you get the RFQs, you go through the process, you get approved. If they start negotiating cost, you just want to find out if you can upgrade into that wholesale or direct import level, because when you reduce, you'll be giving them a reduced price, but they'll be paying you for in bulk orders rather than that one order at a time with the consignment process. And this obviously works in the brick and mortars too, because brick and mortar can also have a consignment where they pay you upon the product being scanned out, checked out of the store. It's a bit tedious for a lot of suppliers who are looking for larger payments, because there's that upfront investment you're trying to recoup. So that is a concern there. But whenever they want to negotiate, you can always try to see where you can upgrade. And if they don't negotiate on that aspect of it, you can negotiate on the aspects of marketing or maybe the terms, anything like that that you can pull into your favor to allow you to get a guarantee that they might move forward with your products without getting stuck on pricing pricing discussions that lead nowhere. Um, Now samples is short because everyone knows it's product sample. The only tedious part of samples is if they want revisions, because samples are something you're paying for the shipping and the product for. If you run into a situation where they want a revision, and the revision request can happen for two reasons. One is for some reason they just decided that it didn't meet their requirements, or they think that the product they received doesn't seem to match what they had hoped. In those cases, to avoid those, you want to make sure their expectations are as close to possible as the reality of the product. If you have to send them a picture or a video of what the product is going to look like before you ship it, at least, so they can take that and consider that while the product's still at the manufacturing or on the manufacturing floor. If you can send them pictures or videos of the final product, and once they seem to confirm it, then you can send it. That can reduce the issues with revision because it's not meeting their expectation. Second is revision because they want to add something to it. Unfortunately, in that case, there isn't really any way to avoid it. Sometimes their marketing team or their private label team will kind of have a change of heart or decide new trend is in fashion, in vogue, and say we want to change the features, we want to change the scent, we want to change the color, we want to change the flavor, etc., etc. That can happen. Unfortunately, that's there isn't really any way to mitigate that, unless you really push them early on to throw everything on the table so you don't have to worry about revisions later on. And when it comes to testing, like I said, it'll be a third-party lab, and they will tell you which lab they partner with. Um, and then it depends on the type of the product, and also that the retailer may not cover these costs. Usually I haven't seen retailers cover the cost of testing, though you might get better pricing, because if you say you're doing it for the private label standards of this retailer, they might have special pricing because they're partnered with that lab, so it might help the costs on that aspect of it, but you'll still be responsible for paying the costs of the testing and getting the goods to the lab. Another thing to note is while these labs, these third-party labs, they're global companies, so they tend to have a lab pretty much everywhere. Um, the only issue is some standards can't be met by some labs, because maybe that lab does not have the equipment, does not have the capabilities, or does not have the staff, or maybe it's just it's something that's unique to that country that can't guarantee meeting the requirements. That can, if that happens, um, you might not be able to go use the lab in the same country as the manufacturer if you are using a manufacturer overseas, or if you are a manufacturer overseas, you might not be able to use the lab there. You might have to ship it to the lab in the US. An example I can give here is one client. He was doing flooring products. And his lab was in Turkey, and he's selling here in the U.S. And the Turkish lab, even though the third-party lab had a lab in Turkey, something about the water quality of the labs, and their lack of equipment and the filtration of it, or something like that, did not allow them to meet standards of the capabilities the U.S. lab had. So they had to ship products to the lab here. So there are some nuances there that can happen. So it's worth asking to see if they can meet these standards. But if you are using a manufacturer overseas, or are a manufacturer overseas, if there is a lab that exists that is in your area, then you can actually contact them and see if they'll do it. That will reduce your costs. So one thing to note for the entire private label process, over everything I've gone over, is you're trying to meet the requirements of the private label and reduce your expenses. Now, I know obviously you want to invest to make sure this succeeds, but there are actually situations where you might over invest inside a private label because you are paying more than you actually would need to. So for good business practice of it, you don't actually need to go overboard, there are ways to trim these expenses by finding options that are acceptable with the retailer partner that will help you meet their requirements without you having to pay extra unnecessarily, basically. Um, One thing to note before we get into the communication and marketing is for one thing to cap off on testing. Testing is extremely important. Um, in fact, if you're not if you're not 100% sure that the product will pass the testing, you might want to invest in testing it, having it tested with the default standards for yourself, and seeing if everything looks good. Because what happens with private label suppliers, with retailers, is when they're looking for private label suppliers, they consider testing to be important in regards to that whole aspect of the reliability of a seller, but mostly because of the product. They don't want products that can cause them concerns. They don't want products that are from questionable supply chains. They don't want products with material that will get them in trouble with regulatory aspects or affect customers anyway. So if any time a test fails, a huge red flag goes up with the private label team. So you do want to avoid failing tests. Now, it's not an automatic failure. They won't kick you out. They won't disqualify you from that RFQ immediately. They might give you a second shot, but you definitely want to make sure that you will pass testing, because testing will be done when you're approved. So 100% sure, make sure that any products that you're putting into testing, if you're not sure it's going to pass, make sure it'll pass before you give it for the official testing, where the report will be sent to the supplier. You can go ahead, contact that lab yourself, say you want testing done for your needs, and say to do it for the default standards, or you can use the requirements that the retailer gives, and then give that as your requirements, and then pay for that. But that's if you're not 100% sure that the item's going to pass. If you feel confident, um, you know, then you don't have to. But in some cases, where if you're not 100% sure, that is an option. Now, as I mentioned, communication always important. Stay in frequent contact. Retailer might not always stay in contact with you, but you should stay in contact with them. Update them, let them know what's going on, let them know if you're running into issues, any delays, anything you can tell them ahead of time, any problems you can notify them ahead of time, any delays, even any successes. If it looks like you're going to meet the deadline ahead of schedule, let them know too. Anything that you can keep them updated with, always a plus, and always in your benefit. But the main reason that you're staying in communication is to make sure if everything is still the same, that they haven't made any changes, and to ensure that the deadlines will be met by both sides. Because there are circumstances where their side might not actually meet the deadlines, and you might be in a situation where you were striving to meet the deadline, you met the deadline, and now you're just sitting there because they didn't actually meet their deadline on their side, and now you're going to have to just wait for them, which is time lost, because you've completed everything and now you're just sitting there. You kind of want to avoid that. So staying in communication and making sure everybody on both sides is taking responsibility for making sure this project goes through successfully. Now, when it comes to marketing, it depends on the terms of the retailer. And like I said, when it comes to private label, everything is negotiable. So these terms will differ depending on you and depending on the retailer. But the two common ones is either the retailer handles all the marketing costs, and then you have the option to maybe run your own kind of campaigns with your own investments, or maybe you don't at all and they just want to handle the marketing themselves entirely. Or two is they will invest a base amount, and then for any additional marketing, they'll offer you an option to split the additional investment. So usually they might do like a 50-50, where if you put in $1,000 to run a promotion or a discount, they'll put in $1,000, and it'll be a $2,000 promotion. That is something that some retailers do as well. They'll still have that base amount, so they will still be advertising that product because it is their brand. But they might not be going full out with the marketing costs. So if you want them to push the brand further and try to boost the sales more, they might say, well, if you want to push it beyond our base amount, we're willing to split any marketing investments. Um, Rarely will you, like I said, rarely will you run into a situation where they don't cover the investments for the marketing, simply because it's their brand. So if they're not investing in it after you get the products, that is a big concern. Um, but normally that shouldn't be happening. The retailer you're working with should be putting money into their brands, even if you are the supplier for the product, because it's something they developed and it's something they should be investing in either method. Now we're going to hop into some examples. There's a lot of examples out there, so I just picked a common few from some large marketplaces and retailers. Amazon as a marketplace has a couple of its own, own brands. Amazon Basics, Amazon Essentials, Solimo, Mountain Falls, Happy Belly. These are all different categories. So Amazon has created multiple of its own store brands in different categories to kind of promote products that are better, have better pricing. So what happens is that they will contact sellers through their vendor central platform, and these sellers. Amazon is very difficult when it comes to B2B through online, because with Amazon, their B2B platform, not selling like B2B, but doing business with Amazon B2B, is through Vendor Central. And Vendor Central is still invite only, last I checked. And invite only means that you either have to be a seller on Amazon Seller Central who's doing really well, that to the point where they see they're interested in bringing you on board, or you happen to be selling on your own site and your product is popping up a lot, and Amazon reaches out and says, hey, we want to have you on Vendor Central to sell your products on our marketplace. Other than that, there is no like application. There's no real contact person. The only alternative you have is if you can catch an Amazon account representative or Amazon account manager at some kind of trade show or trade event, and meet with them in person, and you get a shot to do your pitch. That might help, and that's pretty much the only alternative to just doing business and hoping you catch their attention. So it's very difficult, but the ones that are on there, Amazon will, their Vendor Central, some of them will have the opportunity to upgrade to their private label program, where they will invite them to do private label and supply products to their store brands. And so you'll see in Amazon Basics, for example, um, if you're looking at an Amazon Basic product, there's a high chance it is a supplier who is working with Amazon. Now, Amazon, I believe, has been also kind of working with factories itself on a limited capacity to bring in products itself, and cut out the supplier middleman. Um, it's it's not for all their brands and it's not a lot of items, but Amazon has global presence and they pretty much have good communication with a lot of factories, especially their office in China. So they have very good relationships with pretty much a lot of manufacturers around the world. So sometimes they do cut out the middleman and work directly with the manufacturers to order products themselves for their own store brands. But it's not very common yet. It's very specific types of products and product types that they bring in for. So these are some of the Amazon's store brands that they have on their site. Target is another one. There's a lot more for Target. Their website has a list of it, but here's a couple on the top. A New Day, Made by Design, All in Motion, Market Pantry, Archer Farms. Um, and as you can see here on the screenshot, they've kind of put in a little blurb about what their brand, what that store brand is meant to represent. As you can see, a lot of them are relatively new, except the Market Pantry one, and that's because store brands come and go, and they're always making some kind of investment to try to bring in products to hit certain trends, hit certain styles. So that's usually the advantage that suppliers have in trying to sign up for RFQs, is that store brands tend to evolve. So you might, even if you don't have an opportunity now, you might get an opportunity later when that retailer comes up with a new store brand and they start looking for new companies to do business with, because every process along the way is going to be an RFQ. So all you need to do is get on their RFQ list. Now the question for that, as I mentioned, is depends a lot on the retailer. Um, some of them don't even have that information, about how to become a supplier. Even they make you go through some other process to become a supplier with them. But once you get a contact with that company somehow, whether it's trade show, whether it's some lead or referral, if you can get a person, especially a buyer in a category, and you can speak to them about getting your manufacturing or your distribution or your wholesale business on their RFQ list, so you can stay in touch with any developments that occur as they come out with new store brands or as they look to add products into their existing store brands. Walmart examples: Mainstay, Your Zone, Better Home Garden, Bonobos, and Hey Needle. These are some examples for Walmart's different categories. Walmart is also coming up with new brands as they go forward. They're trying to build out their amount of store brands, similar to Amazon, who has a lot, because they're trying to compete with that. So you have advantages there. And another thing that I didn't mention is it's not just new store brands that's a new opportunity, or new items that's a new opportunity. Sometimes what also happens is a supplier fails out of the supplier program. Maybe they stop doing business. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe there's something happens with the manufacturing, or somewhere along the way things just fell through. What will happen is that, or maybe the pricing is not the best anymore. What will happen is that the retailer will actually start looking for other suppliers and hand out RFQs to replace their existing supplier. It's not as often as the first two situations where a new store brand is created, or they're looking to extend the collections in the store brand. But it does happen, and because you don't know when it's going to happen unless you're on the RFQ list. It helps stay in touch. But the advantage there is that if it is a supplier who is being replaced, things get a bit easier because they already have all the information for the product. They're literally just looking for somebody who can make the exact same product, or make it as similar as possible, and just give them a better cost for it. So that's a very streamlined process whenever the opportunity for that comes up. Now, before we continue, one thing I'm gonna touch upon is something called RangeMe. They're a online platform. They're a separate company. They're kind of like a service company, but they have an online platform where suppliers are able to showcase their brand and products to a wide variety of buyers from prominent retailers, which includes companies like Target. And for the opportunity to sell their products. Now, RangeMe has been growing their list of partners, and the reason I bring them up is because not is because some of these partners have made RangeMe their requirement to do business with them. So like, for example, with Target, you can't just contact them and fill out a supplier application anymore. Target, if you go to Target's page for becoming a supplier, they will give you a link to RangeMe, and they're basically saying, go create an account there, put your products there, and then push it to our buyer, because they're pretty much officially now using RangeMe to handle that product sourcing aspect of it. So because RangeMe has been building more and more partnerships, a lot of the companies that are on their list kind of exclusively work with their online platform, and they will require suppliers to sign up on RangeMe to be able to contact them to become a supplier with those retailers. So you can visit their website, and I'll have a link here. But you'll be able to visit their website and look at some of the partners. They don't show all of them on a web page. You have to create an account and go look. But they have a lot of partners on there. If you think you're going to be if your products are going to be a fit for some of the partners they have in there, you're probably going to have to create an account in there anyway to do business with those companies. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's why I wanted to bring them up, because at the end of the day, it's kind of a mandatory requirement to do business with some retailers. to use this third party that they have partnered with and who they exclusively use to do their supplier search. And to note on that is that RangeMe, because it is a third party service, they have an annual fee that they charge suppliers to use the full features on their platform, which allows you to be able to showcase your products to all their partners. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you look at the partners, you see that the companies that you're trying to target to work with are on there, including Target. You're probably going to have to create a RangeMe, and you're probably going to have to use their service to be able to showcase your product to the buyers of that retailer, because they have started working exclusively with RangeMe. So another situation of an upfront investment to get your products up there, and also try to reach out to somebody who can get you onto the RFQ. Because, like I said, once you get in touch with a buyer, and if you are able to speak with them from that company, with that retailer, you can notify them that you're interested in doing private label, and that you would be interested in being on the RFQ list for whatever category of products that you are selling. So as you can see here, once this presentation is sent over to everybody, you'll see the links here to take a look at the information. This is just a picture of what their site looks like. And to kind of give the gist of it, it's basically a showcase. So you create your company profile, and then you put in your products, and you put the product picture, the product information, some of the product information. You're not putting in a lot of details yet. You're kind of just putting some summarized details, so buyers can shop around. And then you put in your costs and margin, MSRP, all that, and then you can push these products. If you pay, you can push these products to specific retailers. If you use the free version, you only your showcase is passive, so a buyer can search and your showcase might show up, but you won't be able to directly send your portfolio to those buyers. So it's very limited there. So this is how it works. But like I said, because some partners have made it a mandatory requirement, I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that this is a third party that these retailers have partnered with to continue doing their product sourcing and finding suppliers for their websites or their physical stores. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into Q&As. Like I said, it's a very broad topic. Depends on the category, depends on the product. But if you have any questions about your products, or you might have questions about how to navigate anything like that, feel free to bring those up. Because I can give some of the best practices and considerations, or some of the strategies you can think of to help you with approaching private label. E-commerce or traditional, you're working with the same retailer to do private label, to supply their private label, and to do business with those retailers. So let me look at the chat. Oh, RFQ means request for quotes. So they're basically looking. I'll make a distinction here. There's RFI and there's RFQ. RFI is request for information, and RFQ is request for quotes. When an RFI comes up, RFI is literally just what it is. It says they're looking for information. You won't see it too much on private label, except in cases where they're really in their preliminary process for a store brand. But they don't send that information out to everybody. They usually use existing suppliers who they want to provide them with professional information so they can build a new store brand. RFQ is essentially they're looking for the actual products. So RFQs will have sections where they will ask for costs and MSRPs. So the quotes part means you are giving them the cost or the rate for your product, and they're giving you the information for what they're looking for. Okay, I have a question here. Yeah, so it's true, private label has trended significantly towards overseas because of the cost measures, especially countries like China, India, Bangladesh and Pakistan too, if they're doing apparels. Turkey has been picking up as well. It's it's difficult to say how it can come back. There is a caveat there though, and it's not something that pops up too often because I don't know how the retailers tend to promote it. Technically, their offices do have, and I think with some of the recent policy changes going on, with the new administration, the Made in America things might start picking up again. But these retailers, they don't advertise as much because they're looking for the cost savings they get from manufacturing done overseas. But these retailers technically do have a kind of, I won't say a quota because I don't think it's an official policy, but it is something that they keep room for. They look for made. Sometimes they look for made in America manufacturing and suppliers. They're looking. So one example I can give is Walmart had run an RFQ for what was it? For doormats, I think. Yeah, they were running an RFQ for doormats, but this program was specifically for Made in America. So they were sending these RFQs out only to supply. They wanted only suppliers and manufacturers who could actually qualify as Made in America. And this was something Walmart was doing internally. So it was just an inside thing where they said, we have all these RFQs for private label that are running, and we got all these overseas manufacturers providing the products. But let's also have this Made in America aspect, because on Walmart's website they do post that as well. So they were running that program. Unfortunately, they didn't get many responses. One thing I will say on the not the not the federal or state aid or programs aspect of it. I'll get to that in a moment. But on your end, in a communication basis, if you are based in the U.S. Or your manufacturing base is in the U.S. and your supplier in the U.S., one thing you can do is when I mentioned getting in touch with those buyers and trying to get on their RFQ list, you can specifically let them know that your products are qualify as made in America, because they might have a separate branch or department, or just a separate RFQ process where they're looking for manufacturers who are made in America, and they're just having a hard time getting a lot of applicants because they don't really advertise it as a program. They kind of just put it out there and hope that their existing suppliers might have it. Of course, a majority of their existing suppliers are using overseas manufacturers, so it kind of just falls to the wayside. But these retailers will have some kind of consideration for Made in America. So if you are a manufacturer or supplier that uses a manufacturer in the US, I definitely recommend, when you are reaching out to get on these RFQ lists, make sure you emphasize that fact, because if they start running programs, if they have RFQ programs for Made in America, and you have the products, you might have a significant opportunity to start doing business with them, because they might not have as many suppliers trying to sell with them who can qualify for their Made in America requirements. Like when I mentioned the doormats, for example, most of their suppliers are getting their doormats from India. So when they got that RFQ for Made in America, no one was able to respond because nobody really qualified for it. But if you are if you are a manufacturer like that, let them know, and you might have an opportunity to actually start doing business because they just have no one else to do business with. So don't think that if you're not manufacturing a lot, or if you're not a big company, that you might not have a shot. Anything advantage you can give, any kind of special feature, anything that's even made in America counts as a feature. If you're able to present that, you might actually get an opportunity, because they might be specifically looking for somebody like that and they just can't find those options. When it comes to federal and state programs, I can't really comment on the federal one now. There's a lot of things going on. It's kind of hard to pinpoint something specific. I will recommend keeping an eye, and technically, you can stay in touch with the SBDC as well. For any of this information as these policies change. Same thing for state programs, but there are I it depends on the programs. I believe tend to be based on the type of manufacturing or the type of supply. So you'll need to do some research depending on the category of business you're in. So it kind of it depends on the state you're in, which in this case is New Jersey. And New Jersey has some of the prioritized types of manufacturers and suppliers that they support. And then the U.S. policy is some new stuff are being hashed out with some of the new policies and legislation being worked on. So I definitely recommend keeping an eye on. But I think Teco might be able to provide some information as well. But you can stay in touch with the SBDC, and there are some other things. The SBA you can check out, and get some information as things develop as well, because the SBA is the national one. So they will have these news coming in, and I think there's some kind of newsletters you can sign up for to keep up to date with any programs or aids that pop up. And we send these notifications get sent out so you can keep in touch. But just note that it depends a bit on the category, but I think with the way things are going now, there might be more programs popping up that can help out. Oh, I see another question in chat. How do they pay and how many days is negotiable? It's usually term basis. I haven't seen anything less than 30 days. I have seen, in fact, sometimes it'll go up to 60 days or 90 days. How they pay, that you can set up with them. At the most basic level, which I don't really recommend, but they can send out checks from their accounts payable. Alternatively, they'll usually get your bank information and send the payments into your bank account directly. But like I said, the terms tend to be about 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, depending on the retailer, depending on the category, and depending on what you negotiated with them. Because some of them might have 30 net 2% or something like that, or 30 net 1%, where they'll take they'll get a 1 or 2% discount for early pay. That can pop up too sometimes. So there is no standard. It's whatever you negotiate with them and that retailer over the process. I see the question. Yeah, when I said SBA, it's not about something for promote and support. It's more just to keep in touch with any news for any programs that might support that effort. They'll send out notifications about any programs that pass or any not state if it's SBA and you're doing the national level, but they'll send you information about anything that passes on the national level that might apply, that you can reach out to. It won't be through the SBA, of course. It might be through some other government department or maybe some organization. So yeah, that is a clarification I just want to make. It won't specifically be from the SBA. The SBA is just has that newsletter that will send information out. And yes, unfortunately, the current practice has been you're pretty much left alone with you and whatever you can negotiate with the buyer. That in fact that has been the way for the past while. There are hopes there will be changes, but it's still something developing. So unfortunately, it comes down to your efforts and the opportunities you can create with the buyer for now, and keeping in touch with any newsletters as things develop. So yeah, that's a good clarification. And another chat here. When you say order online, do you mean shipping? You're ordering as a customer from the website, and the shipping is cheaper than shipping from the US? Yeah. It's hard to answer that because it depends on who's setting the shipping costs. Because there are situations where customers might not know, but there are situations where sometimes the seller or the retailer is absorbing some of the cost. Because one thing I will, like, for example, some suppliers have a relationship with retailers where they have a percentage co-op that they pay for shipping. So a percentage of all their orders is taken as a shipping cost, as a shipping payment to the retailer, to subsidize some of the shipping. Um, Now, why it's cheaper from China and versus the US? Depends on the product. I think there was issues where smaller products were getting advantage of some loophole that was allowing them to get cheaper shipping, cheaper shipping. Um, so that was the issue. But there isn't one thing that causes that. There can be different situations causing it, for the China side. Now, for the US side, the unfortunate situation is U.S. shipping rates have been increasing year over year. UPS, FedEx, they've all been raising their rates, and there just really isn't a way to get ahead of that. So that's for the U.S. side. But for the China side, there's different strategies that have been used, that have allowed them to get away with those kind of methods, I would say. So there isn't one specific thing. It's just been a variation of strategies that have been used to let the seller or the retailer, if they have that relationship, be able to give that shipping advantage. Because I've even seen some give it where it's free shipping, because either the seller's paying for it or they're somehow subsidizing it through the retailer with some kind of co-op agreements or something like that, to ensure that customers will be enticed to purchase from them. And it tends to be a common strategy among volume sellers, because the volume makes up for the expenses that they incur. So, like I said, there's different strategies on the seller end there, but unfortunately, I think there's different strategies in that entire soup of shipping costs that gets used to kind of get away with those kind of cheaper costs than the U.S. one. I will note that on the US side, if you are a seller or supplier, there are some things you can do to maybe reduce your initial shipping costs. You can either use a third-party logistics company who might have better rates, or if you're becoming a supplier, you might be able to negotiate with the retailer, who might be buying wholesale from you. You might be doing dropship for them. You might be able to negotiate having them pay the shipping, and then you might not pay shipping at all. But that's a negotiation thing, and not every retailer does that. But it is an option.
Do we have any last questions? We do have a few more minutes. Okay.
A third-party shipper. The way I would recommend it, honestly, is yes, there are companies out there that are like on nationally, but honestly, in my experience, you should look for a 3PL, third-party logistics company, who is local, or somewhere near you, in the state or in the county, state or county, because with the national one, I found them, they kind of operate a bit more like a software company that has warehouses, so their pricing is a bit uh, inaccurate, and their level of quality differs, because what they do is they tend to use like subcontractors, so you're not getting significant reliability. So what I recommend is looking for searching for 3PL companies in either the county or the state, and looking for local companies that are established who you can get in touch with, because usually these 3PL companies will be formed by people who have either logistics knowledge or e-commerce knowledge, or both. So you can negotiate with them, and you might get better service and better costs. If if you are if you want to speak more details about your business, I think you'll be able to, you can sign up for a one-on-one, which Toko will go over. But speaking broadly, in my experience, is going for a local business, not like a national company that has these subcontractors, will be a better relationship than working with those big companies, because I haven't really it's too much of like a software company that has brought in subcontractors and they're offering the service. It just doesn't really seem to be as efficient as if you worked with actual professionals who have set up locally with their own businesses.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions. If you do have a question, feel free to post it. I would take advantage of this time to ask anything that you would like. Okay, so if we have no more questions, I want to say thank you to Ahmet for that informative presentation and for your time today. And for those of you here that are in Essex County and you would like to set up a one-on-one appointment with Ahmet, you can either send us an email requesting that appointment, or you can simply just click on the raise hand button here on Zoom, and I will go ahead and make that appointment for you. Again, we do offer a no-cost post-webinar appointment with those within Essex County. And if you're not in Essex County and you're looking for the same assistance, you can visit our headquarters website, njsbdc.com, and you can reach out to your local SBDC office for that. Okay, and at this time, I would like to direct all of you to the chat. I will be pasting some of our upcoming webinars, workshops, the link to request counseling, as well as the link to our Eventbrite page is all there. If it helps, feel free to copy these links so that you can have access to it after the webinar has ended. I'm pretty sure you also are able to save the chat so that you can have that information afterwards. And this year, we are hosting many other webinars and topics such as financing, access to capital, marketing and branding, e-commerce, credit counseling, cybersecurity, and state certifications, and so much more. So if you're interested in any of those topics, you can sign up for our webinars and workshops via our website or Eventbrite page, and you will definitely find a webinar or workshop that best fits your business needs. Also, I want to remind you all that you will be receiving a video replay as well as the presentation slides within 48 to 72 hours. So you can have the information that we spoke about or that you learned today, and you're able to apply it, the strategies and techniques, to your business. After the webinar has ended, in the browser, you will see a survey pop up. Now that survey will help us to adjust our presentations in the future, as well as give us some information on the type of assistance you may be needing for your business. So if you have a minute or two to complete that, your feedback is very much appreciated. And on that note, we will now end this webinar. I want to say thank you again to our presenter, Ahmet, for sharing your expertise. And thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time out today to ask your question and to participate in today's webinars. We look forward to seeing you all at our future webinars and workshops. Have a good weekend, everyone.